Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Murdoch. I work with the team here at Ideagen. I help support businesses on their needs for occupational health and safety, risk and compliance management systems. Now today I'm here with my hat on for the chair for the Scottish Chamber of Safety, and I'm also joined and happily to be joined with Dr. Karen McDonnell. Karen is the Occupational Health and Safety Advisor for ROSPA, where she's responsible for shaping ROSPA policy linked to emerging trends in occupational health and safety matters. So that was a short introduction there, Karen. Can you elaborate on your role a bit more and what current trends are going on with ROSPA and what the focus is for the coming year?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Essentially, ROSPA is a registered charity that seeks to reduce the number of people suffering serious injury and occupational health related damage as a consequence, not only of work. We're a 24/7 organisation, so accidents that happen in the workplace, at home, in leisure time, whilst driving. So really how I would articulate that is we're like a whole person, whole life organisation.
Yep.
So whether you have a 0 to 5-year-old or a pre-retired, retired members of your family, we look at this from a whole person, whole life perspective. We very much believe that accidents and cases of occupational ill health don't need to happen. Mm-hmm. We believe that fair work is a fundamental right for people in society, and that we've all got a responsibility to adopt a safe, a responsible approach to occupational health and safety across our sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. My focus is very much on the working age population. Yep. So my role is to consider what's happening in the workplace that can impact on people, whether they are just joining the workplace as apprentices. We have an ageing population, so people are staying in work for various reasons for longer. Mm-hmm. So we've got to start to account for that intergenerational mix in the workplace also. Working with ROSPA, I work very closely with Scottish Chamber of Safety. Yep. And also Safety Groups UK, because we believe that network provides the optimum opportunity for gaining access to small to medium-sized enterprises. I'm also responsible for managing our National Occupational Safety and Health Committee, which brings together a very eclectic mix of key stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Across the UK, and we meet 3 times a year, and we look at what the emerging trends are, we look at where we think there's a gap in understanding. Mm-hmm. And we seek to work with higher performing organisations to help everybody. Sure. Get it right. Mm-hmm. And then the last little bit of what I do is I work with our awards network. We've got award winners in 30 countries across the world. Fantastic. That impact. Yep. On the lives of 7 million people. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what our conversation is all about today. It's about people and their families and their communities, and helping businesses get it right so those messages get out into the much wider community. So a lot of my time at the moment is spent working with awards ambassadors in different countries here in the UK and elsewhere to share what works. Sure. And sometimes what doesn't, because sometimes understanding what's gone wrong is as important as getting things right all the time. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do.
Yeah, sure, fantastic. So in terms of obviously the countries that you're talking about, because you were in Canada recently, weren't you? Yeah. And you've been in China and sort of all over the world. So how our model works is we very much have this policy drives excellence approach. Yep. So the conversations we have at our national committee very much identify what topics we would like to focus on. So for the last 2 or 3 years, our focus has been on the health and safety needs of young workers and apprentices, because if people get it right early in their career, we stand an opportunity, and this is where we've worked really closely with safety groups. Absolutely. If people get it right early doors, hopefully we start to pull away the trend towards people developing long latency disease. Mm-hmm. So that topic and also healthy working lives at all ages have been topics that have been
the wider world's been quite interested in. So we've presented papers at the Canadian Society of Safety Engineering. This year I'm going to New Orleans to speak to the American Society of Safety Professionals. And again, it's going to be based on our policy work and what we do here in the UK, so other people can learn from it. So there is a lot of interest. So it's very much a policy drive and excellence. Where our national committee and our awards come together is our top award winner, the Sir George Trophy, Sir George Earl Trophy winner, I beg your pardon, actually sits in our national committee. So if we get maybe rarefied and think this is the next big thing, they'll go, actually, this is what's more important.
Right.
This is what we need to think about.
Sure.
So at our last meeting in February, we're very much talking about the importance of understanding fatigue. Because if you have a young child, you might come to your work fatigued. If you've got an older children like I have, they can create issues that you've got to deal with out with work, so that also can be a drain on you. So fatigue is going to be one of the themes going forward. Okay. And what we do is we take these themes and we put them into the mix for our awards. So we used to call it the pride question. So award winners could say, this is what I'm most proud of. But judging pride is quite tricky, isn't it? So what we do now is we use our NOSH themes and our policy themes into the awards. So we then create case studies. Right. And I think that's what we're going to talk about in terms of 45,001.
Yeah, sure.
Is to look at what award winners have been doing, because in essence they are the higher performers. Yep. So well, what have you been doing about X? And then we can start sharing that with the wider world. So that hopefully explains how we link our policy work and sort of driving forward excellence for sort of the wider world.
Sure, fantastic. So thanks, Karen. That leads really nicely into the reason we're here today, is to talk about ISO 45001, the new international standard. Now we know there's lots of content out there, loads of stuff on Google. You know, you can research it from now until whenever. There's so much that you can look at. But you know, it'll be really interesting to see or hear from you the challenges that people have been faced with in businesses, or what, you know, the challenges that they're experiencing, or you know, what's the kind of things to look out for from moving from 18 to 45,001.
Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, it's very much about people understanding the three main changes, or the three themes that have come through from 18,001 and the change towards achieving 45,001 is very much focused on our organisational context, leadership and documented information. I think that people have to round out the thinking in terms of moving forward along any form of accreditation like this, in as much as it needs to be the whole organisation. So every person in the organisation needs to understand what their role is. Yep. There's very much an emphasis on senior leadership in terms of delivering the requirements of the standard. And I kind of struggle using that sentence, because at the end of the day, we're delivering the standard, but we really want to stop people being harmed by what they do in terms of earning their living, whether it's a low-risk environment or a high-risk environment. You know, we want people to be happy, healthy in here when they're in the workplace, and we want them to return home in the right condition also. So I think where the challenges are for organisations is to look at themselves as a whole, to understand how to include everybody in the organisation. There's a huge emphasis on worker participation, and I've got a recollection, I can't remember who said this, but I read a quotation somewhere: if you tell someone something, they'll know about it, but if you involve them, they'll understand. And for me, that's very much what underpins moving forward towards 45,001 and being successful. I think the challenge is also for organisations to really challenge themselves to think, why are they going forward with the certification? What's the value that it adds to them as an organisation? And that's perhaps where, as practitioners, health and safety professionals, practitioners, always stuttered anyway, they really need to maybe upskill to be able to meet the challenges in the boardroom and say why moving forward where certification is such an important thing for them. There's reams of statistics, if you've mentioned, there's lots of content in there. There are reams of statistics
so much
about the numbers of fatalities, the number of people harmed by work. We've had the emergence of mental health challenges
Sure.
for the workplace. So I think the workplace needs to look at you as a whole person. It needs to maybe understand that you're a sandwich. I think, you know, if you think of yourself as a sandwich, I've got children, I've got an older parent, you know, so I'm bang in the middle, and whatever happens to me on a daily basis is what I bring to work.
Sure.
So I think the challenge is there for organisations who want to be successful is to look at the whole person and build as much of that as they possibly can into moving towards achieving 45,001.
Absolutely, because you've got the whole risk part there to play with, haven't you, and talking about it from the risk side of things, which is again a real focus of 45,001, the standard itself. You mentioned there about getting leadership to get to engage and sort of getting people to have the right language to take to the board, especially when they're going for this, you know, to get buy-in from the board to move forward with the standard itself. What advice would you give them, you know, to take to the board to get the buy-in, get the leadership buy-in, and you know, to any sort of ideas that you've got on that?
I think it's really important to look at human capital, and that's another new term. You know, I just got my head around it recently. You know, human capital. I mean, for every statistic I can give you, there's a person behind that. You know, so someone losing a parent, losing a child in an accident that's work-related or non-work-related impacts on that individual. And I think that we to be better at recognising whole people. And we need to create environments in which they can thrive. And there's lots of conversation about that out in the sort of, irrespective of where you look, whether it's in written journals or online, there's lots of information and content there. But I think for organisations to be successful, they need to understand that we have a globally ageing, declining population. We are fighting to bring the right people with the right skills into our organisation, and we very much need to look at how we can bring people in and then keep them with us for their working life. And I think that's very much where leadership comes in. I don't see leadership as being a hierarchical thing, I have to say. I know we have leaders in every organisation because of where they sit within the hierarchy, but it's very much about the interpersonal relationships. And I think the term is near leader, you know, so it's people, somebody you would go to and say, I think they've got a challenge with this. I think it's hazardous. I think it's harmful. What do you think? And they would be there and they would support you to get it right. So it is all about recognising the value of the people and what people bring to the workplace. And it's those skills that will move you towards achieving the standard. But achieving the standard for me is an ultimate goal. And if that's your goal, fine. But for me, it's about keeping people within the organisation so that you can thrive and they can thrive likewise.
Okay, fantastic. We had actually had a question from one of our internal auditors, Rabina, and she was talking about, because Ideagen, we're an office-based business, although we have people that travel around the globe, and you know there are so many companies like us. What she was saying was it is a low risk environment. There's so much obviously in terms of guidance again online, but what's the best approach for ensuring employee participation, especially with regards to safety, other than training? So from a office based thinking.
I think that first of all it's important to understand what you mean by low risk, because I think you've always got to be looking at your data and what your people do. So I'm sitting still here. For me, this is a low-risk environment. However, I did drive here today. So if you've got people who drive for work, from where I can sit here, I see displaced equipment, you know, that whole thing. So it's about the ergonomics of the environment. So I think it's important to first of all, be able to articulate that you are actually a low-risk environment. And that's where you might look at the broader, I think we spoke about mindfulness earlier, you know, that whole, the whole person again. So people working towards compliance, you know, so we know what good compliance looks like in this type of environment. We then look at people's occupational health. So you've got the safety compliance, you've got occupational health compliance, and then you've got the wider wellbeing angle. And I just think that it's important to look at all that data from a number of different perspectives to see what identifies to you. I mean, from a when I'm sitting here on behalf of ROSPA, I am always wanting to ask organisations, well, how much absence do you have because somebody's had an accident they wouldn't have here because you've provided the right training, but they've had the accident not in the workplace, yet they're still absent, so they've still created this issue. So, not issue, I beg your pardon, there's this gap and you need to understand what that gap's caused by. So that you might then share information about how not to slip, trip or fall in the domestic environment. So for me, that's what the type of culture people should be moving towards. And I know that some people sort of listening or watching in might think it's not achievable. It might not be achievable now, but I certainly think this type of approach is a continuum, a thread that runs right the way through the life of an organisation. And the more you get that right, I'm just going to turn over because I found this really neat quote that it's by William Deming, who sort of was involved in Plan, Do, Check, Act, which underpins everything. And he said it's not necessary to change, sort of survival isn't mandatory. So basically what he was saying way back, well, in the 1990 whatevers, that you don't have to change, but if you don't change, you might not survive. You know, so I think that's what organisations have got to think about, because survival is the essence of what this whole process is about. Personal and organisational survival.
Absolutely. And that whole change, the whole ethos behind looking after the people, and the more you look after them, the more you educate and the more you engage with them in the workplace, they then take that back, those skills, they can, you know, they take it back into their families, their, you know, and out with the actual, out with their work environment. So absolutely.
I mean, particularly with relation to driving for work, you know, if you drive more than 25,000 miles a year, you're as at risk of dying at work as you are in the construction or quarrying industry. So that's a big, you know, so low risk environments are low risk. But if people are doing other things out with, that's what you've really got to be thinking about. If they're still working on behalf of you, we need to think about how we make sure they get the right information.
Absolutely. And again, the whole engagement thing with the workforce and talking to them and understanding what that they can, you know, see the risks that are in advance, and making sure that they're not doing ridiculous hours when they're out there driving on behalf of businesses, because, you know, it is during their working hours that they're still working for you, because they still have to get themselves home.
Because that type of data should still appear. You know, if you're looking at all your organisational data, that data should still be there.
Because if they go off, if something happens to them externally, then that is having a direct effect on the business.
Absolutely.
It's a bit, you know, the bottom line of the business is, you know, you want to have them healthy and happy at work. So really, just to sort of round it up in terms of for businesses out there, what the clear benefits of ISO 45001, and you have mentioned that it's the end goal is actually to get it, but you know, if that's your main focus, it shouldn't be, because it is all about people. So, you know, what are the benefits, do you think, today for the businesses of today to attain accreditation?
Like for me, the organisational context is the bit I like best. This is a personal thing, you know. I think it's really good to know where you fit. You know, so if you're looking at the context of your organisation and you're looking at all the stakeholders that you interact with, you then have a map of who you're either supplying to or getting information from. You know, so that can go as wide as the regulator, you know, what would HSE expect of you, or another enforcing authority. So for me, it's that mapping exercise that's the most interesting and I think most valuable, because that's when you can see the picture. I'm a great one for pictures. So if you can see a picture of who your target audience is in terms of delivering 45,001, and you can just re-engage or fine-tune the relationships with everybody in terms of setting the context of your organisation, I think that's hugely beneficial. So I think that's one of the most major benefits of starting out on the route towards 45,001. As a consequence of that, leaders will understand more about what's happening in their sphere of responsibility, and because they've got a deeper understanding, they can then hopefully go and articulate the benefits of that at board level. Ideally, there should be a thread running through about evaluation. I tend to think that we're not always good at evaluating what we do, and that's a personal comment. But if you put a safety or health related intervention in place, you should map it through to find out what the result of putting that intervention in place was and the value it's added to the organisation. And it's only by saying what the return on investment is that you can really crack at boardroom level.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so the humane aspect is always there, the human capital is always there, and that should be enough to convince anybody. But if you've got a valuation of, I was given X to spend, I did Y with it, and look at the difference that's made, I think that is something else that needs to develop as you're moving towards 45,000.
And showing the value, that's the value to the business. Okay, so the transition, when they had 3 years to do it, isn't it? So we're a year in, aren't we? Another couple of years left. To gain the standard. Yeah, so the OHSAS 18001, it wasn't a risk-based approach, it was more reactive to circumstances, and it's more around prevention. So the new standard looks at risks and opportunity to eliminate the hazards, 18,000 being reactive, and this is now a proactive standard. So really the whole standard is around really stopping people harming themselves. Yeah.
And from a ROSPA perspective, we very much go on the basis that prevention is much better, much easier than the cure. There's this huge challenge that we face in public health terms about people who've been harmed by work. So they're physically or psychologically damaged by what's happened in the workplace and the wider world. So I think that there is this whole piece about recognising that 45,001 creates environments in which people can thrive, in which their needs are recognised, and higher performing organisations will provide all the necessary support for people to remain in work and to be working across generations. I think intergenerational working is a challenge in terms of making sure you've got the right ways of communicating with people across. They call it chronologically gifted, you know, you don't talk about age anymore, but how you get different groups of people to communicate in order that 45,001 can be the end point. I think it's very much about recognising the benefits to the business of creating environments where people thrive, because your functional capacity as a human being deteriorates over age. However, if you're creating good work, because good work is good for people, so if you're creating good work, and 45,001 should create those types of environments, people will be personally sustainable, and you'll also have organisations that are sustainable over time also.
Yeah, sure, because you've also got, you've got the someone new coming into the business, people that have been there for a while, but also the ageing workforce, and taking all that into consideration from a risk perspective, because it's a different, a different way of looking at it. So there's been a lot of focus around the standard, and it's a bit of a hot topic now. And do you feel that that's the case?
I think that the journey, and I hesitate using that word, but that's I've just done it. Since 1989, we've been on this continuum, which has taken us from the European directives through to HSG 65, and some of these terms might not be recognised by some of the people watching this, because we're talking 30 years. So
and it was 2018, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
HSG 65.
So we're talking about a 30-year progression. The piece of work to bring 45,001 to fruition was phenomenal, and it's a truly international standard. And I think that's another reason that it has elevated in people's mindsets, because there's been global participation in bringing the standard to fruition, and there's a global interest in sharing the outcomes from people achieving the standard, the benefits that brings. But I think really that the underpinning message for me is that safe and healthy work underpins success, and that's very much what 45,001 should deliver for organisations.
Yeah, sure. And as you say, an international standards, which is great, because more often than not, businesses don't just have work in the UK, they're communicating. The world is such a small place now. Having an international standard really does kind of make sense. Which leads us on to then sort of, once you get the standard, it's about the whole continuous improvement plans that people, continuously improving all the time. What's your thoughts on the improvement programme? programs that you could have in businesses?
Well, I think for me it's like badge collecting, and I sit here as somebody with many badges. I think badge collecting really isn't part of this at all. For me, it is about creating a system that reflects your organisation with the support that you need to bring it forward. You know, so if you're recognising your stakeholder network, you're bringing the best out in the stakeholder network, you're developing people within the organisation, you're seeking the right type of competent advice, you're developing the right skill set across your organisation. All of those are hugely beneficial, but those aren't just add water solutions. You know, so what you want is perhaps to have a few quick wins and then work your way along, achieve the standard, but then to sustain your organisation you need to be constantly looking at what the emerging trends and issues are and bringing those in, bringing those to bear. So I was mentioning earlier, I think fatigue being a challenge, a global challenge, the ageing workforce and sustainable working lives being a challenge, the getting it right with their apprentices and young workers being a challenge, how we communicate. So that whole mix, there'll probably never be an answer to all of that, you know, but there's plenty of meat for organisations to think about and being encouraged to share. I'm just kind of thinking I'm kind of privileged working with our award winner network, because we've got people all the way across a continuum, and we seek to bring the best from those who have achieved the highest and share that widely. You know, and I think that's what the ethos achieving 45,001 should be, really.
Fantastic. And a lot, of course, on the mental health just now. There's a lot of chat around that, and as you mentioned about the sustainability, about the actual person, not you know, that you take that into consideration with people. I
mean, I took a long time when I was doing a piece of work with OHSAS about healthy working lives all ages, and they have a huge focus on sustainability, and it was the first time I'd actually thought about me having to be sustainable. You know, I'd never really thought about, because I make sure the safety and health bits are done right in my place of work, and I provide signposting for organisations who want to get it right, and I'm really good at recycling stuff, you know, so I know how to use the bins right, but I hadn't actually thought about this, having to be sustainable, you know, and that was really kind of drew me up short, because you have what people bring to work with them, and whether they have, everybody has mental health, but if they have a mental health challenges, you need to, again, look at that whole person and provide the right type of support at the right time, to make sure they can bring the best every day.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Cam. Okay, so to close off, we've got, give me three words to conclude what we've talked about today.
I think in terms of 45,001 and people's progression towards it, you remember it's your system and it's there to create benefits for everyone and certainly not to be a burden.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone, today. Thanks again to Dr. Karen McDonnell. Thank you.